Hello, my name is Benjamin Hart. I'm an American attorney and the managing director of Integrity Legal here in Bangkok, Thailand. As the title of this video suggests, we're discussing the so-called war on cash. We've discussed this in other videos where we've discussed things associated with, for example, Thai ID cards now being necessary to deposit money into cash deposit machines, ATM machines here in Thailand. We've also discussed it in the context of discussion out there about getting rid of a certain amount of the money supply and Thailand introducing a so-called digital currency, these kinds of things. But something I was thinking about the other day, and there was somebody I was listening to out there, and to kind of give credit where credit's due, is a person named Alistair McLeod, who is, I believe, a former bank director. He talks quite frequently to a lot of different folks out there on YouTube. And he brought up an interesting point that on this topic of so-called central bank digital currency, this sort of cryptocurrency, crypto cash. They have like the e-yuan up in China now. And, this seems to be something of a, I don't know, you want to call it a pipe dream of central banks or something, where they really are kind of looking at trying to make this digital currency thing happen. I remember, I think it was back in 2018, reading an article that the IMF had this distributed ledger technology, so-called blockchain technology up and going. They were looking at having something associated with a special drawing right. So there's a lot of things going on out there with respect to this, central bank digital currency notion. But Alistair McLeod, if I recall, and I can't pinpoint exactly, I'll try to put a link up to just find him directly as best one can. But I'll try to even find the video where that was discussed directly. But he brought up a good point when he was talking about commercial banks in the United States, that one area, one sector so-called of banking that you're not hearing about central bank digital currencies is commercial banks. Because, and it brings up a good point, if there is central bank digital currency so-called, it kind of calls into question is what's the purpose of commercial banks or commercial banking functions? I can see in sort of the near term, while the world, if you will, or any given economy is getting used to central bank digital currency, yes, there'd still be commercial banking functions. But in the longer term, would there really be the necessity for that, for those commercial banking functions? And as Mr. McLeod brought up, I believe in multiple other videos, there's clearly not a clamor for that, at least in the U.S. commercial banking sector. And I'm just kind of curious if the Thai commercial banking sector has been thinking about the long-term ramifications of so-called central bank digital currency, because I have to raise the question, what does that mean for commercial banks in the long term? And I can see certain commercial banking functions sticking around, but in a digital world, and I really have watched this over the years just growing up, where, being a kid, there were so many sort of, for lack of a better term, white-collar clerical jobs that just existed in the economy that are just gone today. I remember banks when I was a kid, and there were people in them, and they were working there, and they had functions. And yes, you could make arguments that they were just pushing paper around and whatnot, but they still had jobs. They still had functions within an overall system, within an overall institution, if you will. And then cut to going into 2023, I'm pretty sure in the Western bank, and I haven't walked into a Western bank, a bank in the United States or in the West in, easily 5 years, probably a little more than that. But, when I was last there, I couldn't figure out why they even had physical locations, frankly. I mean, other than, I guess there was still cash out there, so they needed a place for people to be able, a teller window, but almost everything was done by drive-through the last time I was over there. I mean, walking into a bank was kind of a rarity, is my understanding. And that's sort of increased efficiency, digitization of processing that has led to, let's say, the diminution of jobs, the diminution of functions by commercial banks. But at the point at which the central bank, and it's my understanding this is how central bank digital currency will work, the point at which central banks are just directly infusing money direct into the economy, not dissimilar to the so-called stimulus checks that were handed out during the pandemic situation going back a couple of years ago, where the Treasury just sent money out to the population. It's my understanding that this is just another sort of, how do you want to put it? Just another kind of baby step past that, where the central banks will just be dealing direct with the public. That's at least my understanding of how this is going to play out. So-called Fed coin, for example, people are going to have, it's my understanding, an account with the Federal Reserve, the central bank of the United States. I mean, if that occurs, it really does beg the question. I'm not trying to, beat a dead horse here, but it really does beg the question, what does become the function of commercial banks either in the United States or here in the Kingdom of Thailand?